Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony today. I want to start by acknowledging the 6 workers who lost their lives as a result of the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Obviously, our deepest sympathies go out to their families and their loved ones. Hours after the Francis Scott Key Bridge tragically collapsed, President Biden came out and said it was his, quote, intention that the federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge. And further, he had, quote, directed his team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible. Administrator Bott, I have a series of questions here as we try to understand the mechanics of the situation before us. And if you would, just give me a yes or no response in the interest of time. While the bridge was located on I-695 prior to its collapse, it wasn't actually considered a part of the interstate, but rather was Maryland State Route 695. Is that correct?
Yes.
The bridge had previously never received any federal funding. Is that correct?
Yes.
I understand that Federal Highways has since approved a request by Maryland to designate the bridge as interstate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Meaning the federal share for reconstruction under the Emergency Relief Program will now be 90%. Is that correct?
Yes, instead of 80.
Okay. So what we're talking about here is a delta of 10% for a bridge that previously never received any federal funding.
Yes.
Okay. In your testimony, you mentioned that authorizing a 100% federal cost share would be consistent with past catastrophic bridge collapses. How many times has Congress authorized a 100% federal share for a fully collapsed bridge?
I think the reference point we're using is the I-35W collapse in Minnesota.
Okay. Some say that we need 100% federal funding so we can get the rebuilding done quickly, but that's not how the ER program works. It's a reimbursement program, correct?
Absolutely.
As I understand the ER financing process, generally individual states, the division offices, and the program office have a process to make sure that projects are ready to receive funding and work can be completed in a specified time period. Is that right?
Yes.
So it doesn't really matter if a project is getting 80% federal share, 90%, or even 100%. The reimbursement is based on project progress and delivery, correct?
Yes.
I just want to be clear that nothing is going to move faster if this is 100% federal funded versus 90% or any other percentage. Whether the state contributes money or not, the process for awarding federal reimbursement is still the same, correct?
Can I just deviate from the yes/no for a second?
Go ahead.
Yes. However, the 10%, so this is the second largest ER request we've ever received, $2.2 billion for Katrina was the first one, so $1.7 to $1.9 billion. So that 10% delta is about $170 to $190 million for the state of Maryland that, as they're programming out their multi-year, multi-billion dollar program, it may not be this project, but it may have impacts on other projects.
Okay, let me just briefly, in the time that I have left, let's talk about the regulatory regime that will be applied here. Are we going to expect any kind of waivers or anything like that on NEPA or any other regulatory compliance measures that would be customary on any other construction project?
So, sir, we would not waive NEPA or any of the environmental requirements, but what we have done is coordinated with our agencies who issue permits, and it is our intention, because the bridge previously existed in this relative footprint, that it would be likely a categorical exclusion, which would minimize the time.
Expand on categorical exclusion. What does that mean?
When you go through NEPA, you can either do like a full environmental impact statement. We could get to a finding of no significant impact on environmental assessment. Categorical exclusion is sort of the more time-limited finding, and what is the reason we would use that basis here is because the bridge previously existed, and we're putting a bridge back relatively in the same footprint.
You're putting it back in the same spot, but not necessarily, because you're probably going to use different kind of construction. Would there be some associated flow studies, for example, to address the new construction?
So that is why we are coordinating with our sister agencies who issue the permit, because it is, as I said, relatively in that same footprint, but probably going to use different piers. It's probably going to have a little bit of tweaking to the approaches, a different height than was there before. So that's why I can't say definitively that'll be a categorical exclusion. It's what we're working towards.
So it sounds to me like there's going to be a great deal of flexibility in the interest of getting this thing restored, rebuilt, and restoring traffic and commerce and everything associated with that bridge. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if flexibility is the right word. I think attention from the sister agencies and understanding that there is a desire to move quickly.
And I'm all for that, and I hope that in the future that other projects are given the same consideration because time is money, and understand that that's certainly the case here, but there are a lot of other projects out there pending that have cost millions in regulatory compliance fees that have really been delayed as a result. So thank you, and I yield back.
Yes, sir.